Well, welcome to this episode of Chakmah Choter. We're back in our library studio, and because my buddy Dode, I can call him my buddy, he's really my king and therefore my boss, but that would be true for really everyone going forward, although it appears that we have a special bond, a unique and important relationship. But as Dode was scribing his dissertation on our relationship and describing the Choter, Dode didn't actually begin by telling us that the Choter was really smart. But nonetheless, that is something he repeats in the 14th Mashal, which is devoted in its entirety to the Choter. It is something he will repeat 4 times in the Mashal, the proverb. However, that's not where he begins. No, Dode's very, very smart man. And so he began by telling us that he has observed the Choter's wife, and that the Choter's wife is especially Chakmah. She is really smart. So she actually plays a significant role in the next story we're going to be telling. And therefore, it is appropriate to have the Chakmah wife of the supposedly also Chakmah Choter here, both sharing this story of how someone who really wasn't very Chakmah tried to besmirch her. And this is the story that we're going to be telling. So, Leah, you have been praised by the king himself, who has probably the smartest man who ever lived, recognizing that he thinks you're especially smart. He says that you are Chakmoth, which isn't just Chakmah. It is all things associated with with Chakmah. I am looking at the picture and looking at Wookie sitting there.
He thinks he's very Chakmah too.
Oh, wow.
Are you Chokmah?
Okay, there we go. So as we move forward and you consider what is revealed in the Torah, this is in the 12th chapter of Bamidbar, which is Numbers, something that we were directed to directly by Yahowah when we had this fracturing incident within the family, to tell us how we should go about resolving it. You're going to find that it begins exactly where the rebellion began, which was denouncing my wife, calling her evil. And they claimed that my wife was so evil, which is the opposite, of course, of what Dode determined, and what, of course, Yahowah and I have also determined, that she managed to corrupt me to the point that I could no longer do this job. And therefore, they needed to come in and not only do this job, but also properly represent Spirit Mom while they were doing it, and to appropriately devote themselves to demeaning my wife while trying to undercut my credibility. Because, well, they know that all the things that Yahowah has said about our relationship together. So the best they could come up with is that I married poorly, and therefore I have been corrupted and no longer can be used by Yahowah, which, by the way, is not Yahowah's position on this matter, as you will soon see and hear. So please don't make the mistake that is common among the rabbis, who assume that a concern over Moshe's wife being of a different ethnicity actually mattered. She was a Cushite. We don't actually know where the Cushi were from, but as a Cushite, she likely is because there's so many places where the Cushites heralded from. As they had relationships with a number of the ancient peoples. Once they're shown in Arabia, which is the case here. Once they're shown in Mesopotamia, Upper Mesopotamia, near Assyria. Once they're shown in association with the Upper or lower, actually, Egypt.
They get around.
Yeah, so they get around.
Mhm.
And but the key thing to know is that Cush does not mean black. How in the world they came up with that, who knows? But the religious somehow came up with the notion that Cush means black, and therefore that Moshe married a black woman. That's not true. In fact, the high likelihood, or the overwhelming likelihood, is that the woman that is being discussed here is Moshe's wife when he did something heroic. He saved the women who were watering their sheep at a well in Arabia after he had fled from Mitzrayim, Egypt, and did a noble thing. He stood between some bandits who wanted to harass them and steal their sheep, and Moshe intervened and said, "No, you're not going to do that. These women are under my protection." He didn't even know them at the time. You need to go away and bother somebody else. And so it was really a courageous thing for Moshe to do. And when the 5 young women went back to dear old dad, he said, "Well, the guy does that kind of favor for you. Why didn't you at least invite him over for dinner?" And so they went and found him, and they brought him to dinner. And he and dad got along great. Who wouldn't love Moshe? He's a man of character. He's a good man. And,
If I may.
And then, he came up with the idea of, you're a good guy. Why don't you marry one of my daughters? And that is likely the issue here.
If I may, before you go on.
Pardon?
If I may, before
Sure.
you go on.
Mhm.
You and Moshe have something in common. You don't back down, and you're very moral men. And that is very rare to find these days. And perhaps it was back then too.
Yeah. I think particularly when it comes to people who cannot defend themselves. Well, I'm reasonably calculated in these issues. I'm always protective of women and of children and of those that are being abused by others. So standing in the gap, I've taken thousands upon thousands of death threats trying to protect Israel from Islam. And so I know what it's like to stand in the breach between those who are being attacked and the attackers themselves. So yes, I would have stood up as Moshe did for the children of Israel in Mitzrayim when he opposed the taskmaster, and I would have done so again for the women at the well. And I do have something that is different in my case than Moshe would have, is that I have the ultimate life assurance policy. According to Yahowah, I'm irreplaceable in this job. I was just dealing with Yeshaya, the 56th chapter, I believe, and God's really clear. We are a team forevermore. There is no dividing us. We are forever joined in this project, and God has invested so much in it, and it's so important to Him that no harm is going to come to me, no matter what I would do. And so it's a little easier to stand up and accomplish what needs to be done. So just be aware that the rabbis make a really big deal about this God overreacting from their point of view. They actually say that God was inappropriate in this case in the way that he treated Miriam because it was just a squabble over Moshe choosing a wife of a different ethnicity. And really, the difference between Arabs and ethnicity and Jews is not all that significant. They're both Shemites, and second of all, the children of Israel, here to tell you, they were Babylonians initially. The family started out Goy, so when God returned to a Goy, he's just going full circle to where he began. So this is the story. God did not react. God didn't even respond to the accusation that Moshe had married inappropriately.
No, but the rabbis thought it their authority to tell God that he's wrong.
Oh, yeah, of course. Rabbis have no issue condemning God. If you read the Chabad analysis of this, they go out of their way to say God was wrong. He overreacted to Miriam, and they completely missed the issue. Why? Because they also want to claim that they speak for God, and they don't want the issue to be what the issue actually was. They want the issue to be an ethnic, racial one, that Jews are somehow superior to Goyim, and therefore the fact that he married a Cushi wife made Moshe inferior to them. And God was having nothing of that. So don't make that mistake. We're going to talk about why this began this way. And the reason it began this way is actually because it's prophetic. It speaks to what the rebellious, leprous hornets have done to try to usurp the authority that God has vested in our mission together. So what is really here is that she was only the point of contention. And it was one used to galvanize many in the community into rebellion against their actual rival, who was Moshe. It is the same situation that my wife, who is Jewish, experienced making this prophetic. Miriam, the embittered, contentious, and rebellious. Now, Miriam's not a very good name. One of the things what I always laugh when, Jesus, which is not, of course, a Hebrew name, nor is Iusun. They're Greek names. And so there was no Iusun in first century Judea. But this notion that Jesus' mommy, the mother of God and the queen of heaven, was named Miriam is to say, I am a blankety blank idiot. Because you can't have a blessed Mother Mary, because Miriam in Hebrew means embittered, contentious, rebellious. It is someone who is mentally and emotionally troubled and despondent. It also, by the way, fits this person who has been so jealous of and unkind to my wife. It also means a well-fed fatling, sister of Moshe. So it is from Mary, bitter fatling, as well as well-fed beast, and Murrah, to be contentious, insubordinate, and disruptive in an either-or proposition.
Oh, disruptive they were.
Boy, what a perfect name for this cast of scoundrels, Miriam. And Aaron. Now, Aaron is also an interesting name. Aaron means the desire to serve as an adversarial alternative. There is no point in this story where Aaron gets his act together. He is just bad news from the beginning.
Complete knucklehead.
Complete knucklehead. He is, and the choice that Israel has struggled with since the beginning, which is between religion and relationship. Yahowah wants to have a relationship. They want to have a religion. Aaron is the guy that represents Israel's desire for religion, while Moshe is the representative of the covenant relationship. So Aaron is
a schmuck.
He is the real schmuck. He is the
schmuck.
He is the jerk of this story.
Yes.
And Miriam is no better. Although Miriam and Aaron both show that you can be part of the covenant. You can be engaged in doing the work of the covenant and work yourself right out of the covenant.
Real quick.
So this idea that once covenant, always covenant, not true. If you don't show that you are devoted and steadfast and engaged in the family for the long term, that you aren't as loyal and as committed as is God, that you don't care for the chores that have been ascribed to the family, and that you want to go off and have your own little gig, you're gone.
Here's the truth, really. Yahowah wouldn't let Yisrael do it her way. What makes you think he's going to let you do it yours?
Correct.
Seriously.
So Miriam, the embittered and contentious, rebellious one, and Aaron, the desire to serve as an adversarial alternative. And this name means alas, one alarmingly chosen to offer a troubling option. It is from Aha, Not So, which is an emphatic adversarial situation with an alarming cry. R, to be otherwise and own all things pertaining to this, none of which are good. Spoke, Wadavar, communicated words to control others destructively. Peel perfect, the object of the hostile narrative, was to have Moshe suffer the consequences on an ongoing basis. Concerning with regard to Moshe, the one who draws out. Over and against the woman of the Kushe. Woman is Isha. You can translate it female or spouse, if you will, but it's the Hebrew word for woman, wife, female.
I'm definitely your woman.
Spouse is Isha. So there you go. Yes, Leah is
I'm your woman. Yeah, it's accurate.
My woman. But she is not Kushe. Ha-Kushe of the Kushites, a descendant of Ham, Noach's grandson, suggesting either from Egypt, Arabia, or Mesopotamia. In this case, they were moving around, and it was Arabia, who, for the benefit of the relationship, he had selected as a wife or a woman, Isha, having taken a Kushite. All right, so here we are. We're setting the scene here, and we've got Miriam, the embittered, contentious, and rebellious one, and Aaron, who had a desire to serve as an adversarial alternative. They're speaking contentiously concerning Moshe, who is the one who draws out. And their initial complaint was over and against the woman, this Kushi, who, for the benefit of the relationship, Moshe had selected as his wife, having grasped hold of a Cushite. All right, that was in the wilderness, Bamidbar, Numbers 12:1. There is, by the way, I should just remind our listeners, Leah, that there were no chapter or number breaks in the original Torah.
No, they were not.
Okay. What precedes the 12th chapter, as we know it now, of Numbers?
11th.
The 11th chapter. Wow. See, Dode was right. She got it right. You know what the
That's not hard.
Do you know what the 11th chapter of Numbers covers? What is the event of the 11th chapter of Numbers?
Oh my gosh!
Okay.
It talks about the bull. No.
The 11th chapter of Numbers is devoted to Yahweh being exceedingly upset with the Israel, and he's upset with them to the point that he burns everything in proximity to the camp. And he says,
whole camp.
And he says they are obnoxious, they are
vicious,
belligerent, they are
contentious,
disrespectful,
insolent.
They are contentious. They're everything bad. They're just impossible. I want nothing to do with them. I'm going outside the camp, and I'm going to show my frustration by burning everything up. And so then they didn't get the hint that was probably a bad idea. So they continued to be belligerent, and they came up to Moshe's tent and started belly aching there. Yeah. And Moshe just finally said, I've had it. Now, finally, they're only 3 days out from Choreb. And Moshe says, I've had it. I can't deal with you. I don't understand you. I don't like you. I don't want to be here. And he has a meltdown. And he tells Yahweh that these people are impossible, that the job he has been given cannot be done. He wants no part of it going forward. And that
you might as well kill him now.
That the worst part of the whole thing is that there's a mother goddess cult emerging in the midst, and that I want no part of this. You might as well just kill me because no one can do this job. These people are impossible. And God agrees with him.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing story. He says, all right, I'll lighten your load here a bit, pal. We'll have 70 people who will share the spirit. And well, those people are said that they said nothing that had any value. That wasn't the point. They did share the burden. They were actually helpful going forward. Moshe had someone who would work with him so that he wasn't doing this all alone. He would speak uniquely and individually for God, and no one else would speak for God. But there was a team of 70 people surrounding Moshe that would make the job possible. And then as God has created this accommodation for Moshe, we find miraculously, prophetically, that there are two people that are ultimately going to resolve this rift between Yisrael and Yahowah, which is so severed at this point that God says, I want nothing to do with you, and Moshe has given up on them. And those two people are Eldod and Medod. And Eldod is the beloved of God, who is Dod, his beloved son, whose name is Dod and means beloved. And
The beloved.
he is the central
The
player in
beloved.
this story.
Yeah.
And Dod, as I've mentioned, I have a special relationship. I'm Medod, and Medod
that
is
romance.
is the one who comes from the sea, because it's Mem, who is a source of cleansing and of life, and it has the Yod, who serves to influence and as an uplifting force on behalf of Dod. So he's the one that presents to Yisrael a restoration of the relationship they should have with their king, with their Messiah, with the Son of God and their Savior, Dod. And so these two individuals are filled with the Spirit. The Spirit never leaves them, and they speak profoundly and prophetically for Yahowah from the tent of the witness. And so this is the 11th chapter of Bamidbar. And
The Moshe meltdown.
Yeah, and it flows right into the 12th. So Moshe is already on his heels. He's already had more than he can handle. He's already checked out. And now he has his own brother and sister come up to him and give him lip on his wife because they want to claim that he's been incapacitated and that they now should have the responsibility of speaking for God.
We too speak for God.
Yeah, that's exactly as the Mother Goddess cult has claimed. And
they have their own translators too.
And in our case, although he follows my format and uses my transliterations and completely copies my style, and doesn't really
completely totally
and doesn't offer anything new, and doesn't do it as well by his own admission. So there is an attempt among Christians here to make this about race, suggesting that the kush here denotes someone's skin, pigmentation, or ethnicity. But there is no correlation to black in the word. All that matters is that she was of a different ethnicity, even if marginally so, than the others in the group, which was a means to disparage and discredit her, while using her to make Moshe vulnerable to being manipulated by these consequences and these co-conspirators. This was, therefore, a harbinger of what occurred with my wife, Leah, who is a Jew. And I've made this point a number of times. Leah's way of introducing herself is, hello, I'm Jewish. My name is Leah.
Yeah.
And
I let them like an easy door out. You don't like Jews? Just
get
Jewish,
it right out.
I'm
Get right out. I'm your
now.
token Jew. And if you don't like Jews, then you're not going to like me.
Definitely not.
But that's okay. I don't like people anyway, so it works out very well. Kind of like putting a fence up,
a little bit
around a home. So this was a harbinger of what occurred with my wife Leah, who is a Jew, and therefore, unlike me in that regard, although I have been, I think, on a path that makes me more Jewish, more Yehud, certainly.
More Yehud than most Yehud.
More Yisrael and what those names actually mean than any other member of the tribe. But unlike me, racially, we're different. I have to be different. Otherwise, I could not be the man from Edom, and I couldn't be the Nakar, the observant foreigner.
And I've seen your DNA. About. You're definitely Goy.
Yep. So unlike me and them, at least from their Goyish perspective, where Yehudim are commonly degraded and demonized. And the same logic and tactic was deployed by the leprous hornet's of Goyim Motherites. In fact, demeaning my wife to discredit me became an essential plank in their rebellion and was featured as part of their teachings. Yes, they had a whole
More like
teaching.
diatribe.
Yes, they had a whole teaching on the evil nature of my wife. They actually said
I saw
that
every
it was
bit of it.
Zechariah, either 5 or 6, that depicted my wife as the whore of Babylon.
Oh, they've said much
Yeah.
worse, but we cannot reproduce those here on this show.
Yeah, so we actually did a program on that, and no, not so much. But this individual, the psychopath that led the rebellion, she does bear a lot in common with that whore. And she is discarded in Babylon. So that we are clear in all of this. We are not told if the woman being harassed by the other women and by Aaron, who was the purse puppy of Miriam. And that's important because this woman, the psychopath that led the insurrection, she also had a purse puppy. And this woman was attacked as Zipporah. Zipporah it was the woman that Moshe married after having her recommended by her father and after having stood up to protect she and the rest of her sisters. So if so, she was one of the 7 daughters of Jethro, the shepherd, and the priest of Midian, whom Moshe married upon his arrival in Arabia. This is likely because the story of their meeting, where Moshe defended her and her sisters from bandits and then was invited to break bread with dear old dad, is one of many affirming Moshe's remarkable character. It also reveals that Goyim were more appropriate and more appreciative, really, of, and this is really true, boy,
of Moshe.
that Goyim are more appreciative of Moshe's heroics than are Israelites.
I'll agree.
No, the Torah is quite clear on this in this regard. The Goyim are more appreciative of Moshe's heroics than are Israelites. And if victim of the assault, this victim was not Zipporah, which means, by the way, the early bird. It's a lovely name. I mean, imagine having a wife named Early Bird. It's Zipporah. It even sounds pretty, the way it dances across the tongue and floats away. So if it was not Zipporah, then we do not know the woman's name. There would be no telling whether she was an additional wife or a subsequent wife, should Zipporah have predeceased Moshe without mention. No, I don't think that's true. Although, since this is very early on during the Exodus, Zipporah is the most likely victim of this racial assault. Further suggesting that this was Zipporah, in Shemot 4, we discover that it wasn't until Yahweh grew frustrated with Moshe and confronted him over the life and death matter of the failure to circumcise their son that Zipporah did so. She tossed the foreskin towards Moshe's feet and said, "Surely you are a Chatham, a bridegroom and son-in-law of your blood to me." Yahweh's insistence on circumcision of their son, his framing of the failure up to this point as a life and death decision was important, and Zipporah's response was even was interesting, as well as the subsequent "and a bridegroom of blood" regarding the circumcision.
Which means she understood it.
Yeah, it was really a riveting statement and all of its implications.
Clever lady.
Yeah, and it's an incident with another unknown wife. Therefore, after her position finally on circumcision would seem incredulous. But it is also interesting that as good as Moshe was on so many things, he didn't circumcise his son. And now it is also telling that Moshe's son may have been born at a time that that Moshe may not have known Yahweh as well as he would over time. So anyway, it is Zipporah that not only did the circumcision, but also got our attention and Moshe's with her narrative regarding it. So therefore, in full consideration of the evidence, recognizing the heroics of her journey into Mitzrayim with Moshe to free the children of Israel, and noting her ongoing support of her husband, who was the most important man in human history up to this point in time, it is particularly telling that Miriam, the contentious and embittered, spawned her rebellion by demeaning a very prominent and positive character in the story of the Exodus. Clearly, no one was more important than Moshe at this moment. Clearly, that happenstance around the well with the bandits and the women and the marriage into that family was something God arranged. It was something He wanted to have happen, and so she is likely the product of an arranged marriage. And obviously, she had a mouth on her, and she understood what needed to be done, and she did what Moshe even didn't do, and she explained why. So
I've never thought about the two of them being an arranged marriage.
Yeah, so I think it's very much like our situation, where there's really no way to do this job and not be married into Israel. You need
all
you need
in.
to have a Jewish wife. You need that perspective, and you need that love. And so, Yahweh provided Moshe with what he needed. He provided me with what I need to get this job done. Now, had I not experienced this same tactic up close and personal and witnessed the psychopathy at play and a similar circumstance, I would not have fathomed how anyone could be so immorally conniving in a self-incriminating and self-destructive assault on a good woman, or why anyone would ally themselves with such a misguided aspirant. Nevertheless, just as has been the case with my wife, Zipporah, the early bird, had been the butt of slanderous antipathy and exceedingly mean-spirited gossip among the women, and probably with their...
I'm having a little deja vu over here.
Yeah, probably, including their purse puppy as well. And those who sought influence with God for themselves foolishly used their disdain and their jealousy against her to justify their power play as part of an embittered rebellion. Similarly, the women who had gathered around me, who had learned everything they knew about Yahweh and his bereth from me, as had been the case with Moshe and all of the children of Israel, they were abhorrent in their scandalous and petty denunciations. In my case against my wife, infinitely worse. But in my case against me, they have also been infinitely worse than they were against Moshe.
Oh, revolting.
And so this rebellion, much, much worse against me and my wife than what we're going to read happened here. And yet you're going to find what God said what he did in this case. So if they were infinitely less scandalous and abhorrent towards my wife, towards Moshe's wife, Zipporah, and against Moshe and in their claims that they made of also speaking for God than was the case with me at this time and my wife, then you know that their fate is not good. It is as bad and as dark as bad and dark ever get. And they brought it among themselves. And it is important we tell this story because Yahweh picks one person at a time to speak through. And in important times, that person is exceedingly well acknowledged, such that there is no question whatsoever as to who God has chosen to communicate through. And anybody that claims that they also speak and that they have a rival interpretation, in this case, speaking for Mother God,
Mommy dearest.
and to be in a contentious cult, that is a really bad thing from God's point of view.
Exceedingly.
So 3,400 years later, and on the cusp of the final exodus from the Mitzrayim, religious and political crucibles of the oppression of the time of Yaakov's Tsar troubles, we find this all playing out again, which is exactly how Yahweh uses the past to teach us how to deal with future circumstances. And this time, we're witnessing a much more severe rendition of the revolt than was brought against Moshe's unique and vital standing with Yahweh at the time. We are not only running out of time to save the Israelites, today's Mitzrayim, or today's Miriam in this case, continues to babble, to be confounded by commingling truth and lies, and her Aaron has doubled down rather than backing down. He's put himself in a very bad situation and lured others to do the same, although their cadre of fellow hornets has dwindled to, well, less than 2 handfuls and probably as few as 6. And that makes this entire story prophetic of the challenge once posed to my responsibility at this time for God's people as his Choter and Nakar, his Kol and Zeroah. And while that is why Bamidbar Numbers 12 was written, it's for our benefit. There is yet another advantage because that story doesn't have any application to what occurred 3,400 years ago. It is for us today, as was Numbers 11. It's actually counterproductive prior to us understanding its implications now.
And thank goodness we had a blueprint for how to deal with it.
That was God's answer. When I asked him, how do I deal with this? I'm inferring that there was no written instructions that I could find in his Torah and prophets on how to deal with this. And he said, young man, haven't I just directed you to Numbers 5 and Numbers 19 on who the red heifer is and your role as the red heifer to cleanse the adulterous woman of Numbers 5? And you don't know that I've already answered this question as to how you're supposed to respond to this specific incident coming up exactly the same way? You're pretty good at math, kid. Why don't you look in the middle between
Split the difference.
5 and 19? Oh, okay. Well, this is what we found.
Amazing.
Yeah. So while that is why Bamidbar Numbers 12 was written, and it's for our benefit, there is another advantage. The reason that rabbis focus on the conflict with Diaspora, rather than the challenge to Moshe's authorization as Yahweh's lone voice. And the reason they accuse God of overreacting is that this story condemns them.
It's about them.
For having usurped Yahweh's authority by way of their oral law, their Talmud. It is equally indicting of Peter and Paul and of the popes who have claimed to speak for God without any authorization from him, making their edicts authoritative and binding on people without any authorization. No prophetic prophecy describing their role. Now, Miriam and Aaron tried the same trick, not unlike the serpent in the garden. So now that we understand the circumstances and how they were identical, we arrive at the actual reason behind the embittered and contentious rebellion. We want to speak for God too. Boy, because if you can speak for God and you're not actually authorized by God and inspired by God to do this,
You're done.
then, well, not all you're done, but you're going to convey a God of your own making. And he's going to have nothing to do with the real God. And so to claim to speak for God, you need to be inspired by God, you need to be authorized by God, and you need to be consistent with everything God has to say about himself and his relationship with his people.
And the woman who led this rebellion had no such authorization or sense.
Nope. And they said, there is a question as to whether Yahweh has only and exclusively given the message and spoken the word through Moshe. Has he not also through us given the word and spoken? That was it. They didn't even make a statement, but sometimes when you ask a question, it begs an answer. And so they were asking two questions that begged the answer they wanted to get. Hasn't he also through us given the word and spoken? Perhaps there is a question in the community as to whether Yahweh has only and exclusively given the message and spoken these words through Moshe.
Yeah, I'm basically telling Moshe, just who the hell do you think you are?
Yeah. Bamidbar in the wilderness, Numbers 12:2 and part. They were questioning Moshe's authorization to speak for God and to be the lone spokesperson for God. God had no issue whatsoever and actually was supportive of the idea of them supporting Moshe. When Moshe exclaimed the Song of the Sea, it was Miriam who led the women's chorus, where she was considered a prophetess for that moment. So she was clearly part of the covenant at that moment. But then she says, well, I also want to speak for God. And God said, no. Can't write yourself into God's story. You can be written into God's story, but you can't write yourself in. That's why we spend so much time talking about the 1,000 or so prophecies specifically pertaining to the Nakri and Nakar, to the Bashar and to Yada, to the...
Even that his wife would be barren. Oh.
Yes, and to to Yada's, the Choter's wife. There are many of them, and they appear everywhere. I mean, every time we turn around, there is. We don't even have to turn around. It's everywhere.
Right there.
It permeates.
That's right there.
It permeates the record from the Torah and through the first and the last of the prophets. So there is no question that Yahweh chooses, and that He introduces, inspires, beholdens, equips, forms narratives around, and is tremendously supportive of the men through whom He communicates to His people. There have been very few of them, especially in major roles. So we know a great deal about each, in addition to their place, their time, the challenges they endured, their opportunities as well. Therefore, the answer regarding others contributing to God's message, apart from His chosen implements, was, and it remains, no.
Or like hell no.
No, just no.
Absolutely not.
You know, we have, and I've been exceedingly pleased with having a supportive team, as Yahweh provided the 70 around Moshe to carry the burden, because it's a lot to undertake. And we have Rich here as our principal burden carrier, and Kevin that also does such a marvelous job for us, and so many others that are engaged in this work, Charles and Stephen and many others, Mariah,
Patty.
Patty. Yes, there are many to start naming, and it's too many to name. But
We love you.
We are a family here, and so Yahweh has provided numerous people to support this work, but there is no one else who speaks for God.
No.
There's no second Choter. There is no second.
It is not plural. It is singular
Nakar.
masculine.
There just is no other Yada.
Nope.
It's one and done, and that's he's going all in with his guy. So this is exactly what he has known, that is identical really to the current rebellion against me, and that God foresaw it and provided these instructions 3,400 years ago. And our situation is also with a deeply troubled and clinically diagnosed psychopath, a woman who is deeply disturbed, and a very demeaning man that has become locked to her, and a relationship where they're promoting themselves as the alternative to Yada, the Nakar, Choter, Kol, Bashar, and Zeroah of Yahowah, through whom the Almighty has inspired 35 books that you see behind me, filled with very profound and unique amplified translations and uncommon transliterations, countless audio programs, and thousands upon thousands of previously unheralded insights, many of which are earth-shattering. Some are the greatest discoveries in human history.
And that is true. And if I may, we are all free to choose Yahweh's words, where they go, where they lead, and to follow them. Or we are free to choose something else. Yeah. But you are not free from the consequences.
That is correct. You can make your choice to I too speak for God, but that comes with a
severe penalty,
a real consequence. Listen, I didn't write myself into this story.
Nor did I.
Yahweh wrote me in long ago, and my qualifications are many in this case, but the most important of them is I was willing, and I was willing. Going back 24 years ago. And it's not just willing, but I have been steadfast, and I have been devoted to this for 24 years. And you can't make up for that time, because it's a very steep learning curve, and it requires an enormous amount of study. And we have done things together that no one has ever done previously. And so the evidence that proves that the 1,000 or so prophecies that Yahweh has provided regarding this role that he has asked me to play, and that he is supporting with his 7 spirits, is overwhelming.
The statistical probability of being anyone else at any given, it's zero. It's out of this world.
There is
crazy.
No probability.
No.
And so I recognize what I've been asked to do. I've accepted the role, but you can't write yourself into this. You're either written in or you're not. And in this case, of course, they are using to make their point the very words, the names, the accolades, the insights that Yahweh revealed through our collaboration. Because as was the case with Moshe, they would know nothing of God apart from what I, as Yada, had written and spoken about him. Now, these ostracized interlopers would have those they have beguiled into the rebellion believe that their message should be considered even more relevant and superior, in spite of the fact that they were inappropriately using the witness that I had revealed, my translations and proprietary style, which is exceedingly unique, very, very different transliterations that had never been seen before. Even my logos, my insights, even name was emblazoned on their deception, on their counterfeit.
It's disgusting.
And that became the basis of their message, only to pervert the truth about Yahweh's nature. They make him now Yahweh to serve their agenda, which is to have a duplicitous God who is two rather than one.
No, what they really did was they gave up a perfectly good relationship to figure out a way to make a religion.
But that's what
Good for you.
That's what psychopaths do. And listen, I'm going back here because Yahweh is walking us through the pages of his Torah, revealing not only how he prepared these insights for us so that we would know how to respond as a family and as a community, but also so that we could teach God's children how they should respond. And also because fractured families are the essence of the relationship God has had with his people from the beginning, and that all of his people have had with their families. If you don't like the story of fractured families and how God ultimately brings us all together, then you're not going to like God's story very much.
No.
Because every
really.
step of the way, there are fractured families. And I've gone through all of this from the beginning. I don't need to repeat it now. But if you don't have an appreciation and empathy for what God has endured with his constantly fractured family, and you don't experience it both in your own personal family and in your extension, this work family that we have, this, then you just have no way of appreciating what God has endured. And you need to overcome it if you're going to prevail, because that is the primary job, is overcoming the fractures that have caused Yisrael and Yehudim to split away from one another and from Yahweh himself. So this is an essential teaching.
I think there's
core of our message.
I think there's another lesson in here is to show also the covenant members currently how it is that Yisrael got where she is today. Religion is not a victimless crime. They've been saying this for years. It breaks relationship. It destroys families. It kills. It literally kills.
I think it's more than that. In Numbers 11, I'm given
Asher's
hello.
Asher's deeply protesting.
Yes. In Numbers 11, it is a message to me that this job is exceedingly difficult, that Moshe himself gave up and couldn't do it.
Come here.
So the idea of teaching, leading, and directing God's wayward flock is essentially impossible, and that it cannot be done alone. That's a message to me. That we don't have the opportunity for a meltdown now. So I need to understand what we're up against and to tailor my approach in conjunction with Yahweh in a way that we achieve his desired results. Numbers 12 is to everyone else that's part of the covenant family. And it is the message, I think, that more than any other got, for example, Rich's attention, who is over here and will soon be participating in shows. Actually has a camera and a microphone, so he can do so. Even the switch to bring himself into these shows. But what we learned in Numbers 12 pertains to everyone else in the family, because it essentially says, even if you have spoken for God in the past and been a prophetess, even if you're one of the people that Yahweh brought along this way and say, he's a blabbermouth, if you want him to speak for you, then here he is. That these two individuals that were part of Moshe's family were capable of going AWOL and being rejected by God. And what that means is not once covenant, always covenant. What it says is that if you're covenant, you're going to be motivated to stay the course. Your love is going to be serving Yahweh, reaching out to his people, supporting his Choter, his Nakar. Your ongoing motivation is to stay the course. You're part of a family. You're going to act like part of that family. You're just not going to say, okay, I'm in. This is now my harvest that's coming up. We're done. No, it's an ongoing job. We got a lot to accomplish over the next year. We have to stick to the mission. And I don't think anyone who is part of the covenant now is saying, boy, I need to stay with it or I won't be part of this covenant going forward. No, their understanding is slightly different than that, which is that those who have given up, who have tried to gone off on their own, are on their own. And that a sign that you are genuinely concerned about Yahweh and his people and his beloved son and his message and his goal in terms of what needs to be accomplished over these next 99 months is that you not only stay the course, you enjoy it. You're here because you want to be.
I have a little bit to add to that. Yahweh put his name in a house. A house is for a family.
Mm-hmm.
Brothers, sisters, cousins. We all do different things. We all have different proclivities. Some people like music. Some people like words. Some people like poetry, yada, yada, yada. The one thing they do is they work together to make the house functional.
Mm-hmm.
One sweeps the floors, the other dusts the curtains, whatever needs to be done. And that's what family does. And they pull together to make the house function.
You know, it's an interesting thing you say that. I was a little late for Rich's tee off time today, about 15
Island
minutes.
time.
And it was because I was dealing with one of the more amazing revelations, again, that I've encountered. It's one that we're going to cover in future Chakmah Choter series because it is part of the Bashar Herald Coming Home Volume 4 that we're communicating this program through. And it's in the 56th chapter of Yashayah, where the Choter is, not the Choter, it's, in this case, it's the Nakar is introduced. And the Nakar is actually introduced as Yahweh's son. So he is.
Whoop, whoop.
So he's given a really special place with Yahweh, not only being the observant foreigner, but Yahweh's son. And you'll find that I talk a lot about that, why that introduction was made. But as we go down the list, God speaks of those who would be contentious but unproductive, and how they would challenge his Nakri and his relationship with him. And God says that his relationship with the Nakar is inseparable, that they are joined together, that where the Nakar goes, he goes, where he goes, the Nakar goes. They are inseparable, and they're inseparable forever, and that nothing can get between them. But then he actually ends it by saying that as a result, he is over and near and beside the Nakar's home. He's part of his home and family. So
how interesting.
So it's really interesting. He says, yeah, so nothing is going to separate me. And because I'm over and above and around and near his home and family. It's really the next part of it's also I can't keep a secret very well.
No, you are terrible at secrets.
The next part is that it talks about a someone who is unproductive but claims to have some authority, who suggests that Yahweh is now a withered and shriveled tree that can no longer produce fruit.
Oh.
And well, the reality is that God's favorite title for his beloved son is Shemek. It means that he's the main branch, and he's the main branch of the tree of lives. And his favorite title for the role that we're engaged in together, the one that
Is it talkative
necessitates
stick?
the seven spirits of YAHOWAH, is Choter, which is a stem. Where do you find branches and stems?
On trees.
On trees. And what God is saying, don't think for a second that that the branches off of my tree have shriveled and are not productive. And then, of course, there's two other trees in God's story. They sit on either side of the menorah and are planted right on top of the Temple Mount. They are the two witnesses, Yada and Elia, and they're going to bear fruit too. So it's a very interesting comment. And until you have this foundation of knowledge of God's entire story, you would never recognize why God would use that term. That that the unproductive ones are going to think, I will say that I'm a withered and shriveled tree. Well,
Oh, they called us worse than that.
so there you go. God is saying, no, not so much.
No.
That is not the case. So the ostracized interlopers, if you will, have beguiled this mini rebellion, and we wouldn't even be thinking of it if it wasn't for the fact that a wee
It's
little
recorded
helper,
in
a wee little
Torah.
helper. We've had 3 here recently without even a request. I've not made any request. I don't even think about these people. I've made no request, but we've had 3 people that have provided us with their notes of their agenda, their communication between themselves. And I mean, they are really, really nasty. I mean, they really are. They're scared to death of me, and yet hateful of me. It's this weird combination, and they remain absolutely fixated on demeaning Leah as a way to demean me. We have under the desk right now a love affair between our two dogs, Asher and Wookie. So it's good to see that they do like each other. That was also an arranged marriage as well. So we know that no one can consider their message more relevant or superior to what God chooses to convey through his chosen branches and stem. And when you copy someone else, like Paul came up with just his counterfeit of Dode to create his Jesus. Well, to create the mother god, this psychotic cult copied me. I mean, it's like they were wearing me as a skin when their website came out. I mean, it was everything about it. They even went to the new menorah logo that we're now using. They used the exact same bookshelf, which was the style that I asked to have conceived and presented. They took my exact same, very unique, previously unknown amplification and translation style, my same transliteration of words, same definitions that were so unique, same insight. They even put my name on their site. It was...
Oh, they tried to wear you like a human skin.
Oof.
It was very disturbing.
And even my transliterations of names and words, which are so different than anyone else has previously done. So they wanted to take all of that and claim that they then were therefore not only speaking for Spirit Mom, but if they didn't speaking for Spirit Mom, those who were listening to Yahweh's chosen implement were all going to die. And that no one could save them, and that maybe Yahweh would spare me since I was the red heifer, the Adamah Parah and all, that he'd probably spare me. But all the rest of the people were going to die because I wasn't speaking on behalf of Spirit Mom, who, by the way, doesn't exist. Although the Spirit Mom cults are probably the most prolific throughout time.
Yeah, remember when she wanted to be the gazelle that wanted to save you from the sacrifice?
Yeah, she wanted to be the gazelle. Yes, we were translating and Barashith, and it was a passage where it was very prophetic because the lamb was there, represents Dod and his sacrifice, and the bull was there that represents Yada and his sacrifice. And it was a very interesting presentation. And in that midst of it, there was a Sephora, but there was also a gazelle. And she said, "I am that gazelle. I am the songbird of this group."
Done my research.
And I said to her, "You better be careful of trying to write yourself into God's story, because the gazelle is an exceedingly nasty term. And if you want to be the gazelle, then well, you are a rebellious, contentious, embittered one who is working for the adversary. So." Choose it with caution. Well, maybe now it actually fits. Who knows? So that really serious flaw in their scheme, and that they had to counterfeit me to have any credibility, notwithstanding the malcontent and embittered hornets that I have dubbed as the leprous Gorium mother rights as a result of Yahowah's testimony and instructions in this matter. They have claimed that the Yada Yahowah .com website, offering the translations and insights gleaned over these 24 years of my collaboration with Yahowah, should be torn down. And that those blindly listening, they have, oh God, they constantly besmirch everyone who is listening to this program and who contributes at the Facebook and at the X sites and works on our behalf on YouTube. Oh boy, they are exceedingly demeaning of them as well, and that we're all going to hell and we're all going to die because we're not privy to the voice,
her special teaching
of Spirit Mom,
Yeah.
and her revealing her divine persona. By the way, you know what's really interesting is that when it comes to the feminine manifestation of Yahowah's nature through the Ruach, not only did I go further than anyone in human history and write vociferously about the Ruach being feminine, I went too far.
Yeah.
Rather than not going far enough, I went too far. In fact, we even had to conduct a mama-ectomy to make certain that we recognize that Yahowah never presents himself as anything other than our Father and masculine, and that the fact that the Ruach is a feminine noun, well, so are thousands of other Hebrew
Torah.
words. You know, Torah is a feminine noun. It doesn't make Torah a woman.
No.
Bereth, covenant, is a feminine noun. It doesn't make the family comprised of all women. So you just have to be careful, and they just went way overboard. I actually went too far, and the very thing they blame me of not going far enough.
And that it would be deadly. But I want to add one thing before you go on.
Mm-hmm.
The vitriolic insolence that is being spewed about Yahowah's Nakar
Mm-hmm.
in order to lift up a false religion based on some secret teaching that only she has.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous on its face. And it's not something I will forgive or forget. Not ever. It's vile and disgusting. And it is exactly how religions are started. It makes my stomach churn.
Yeah. What most people don't appreciate is that, well, God picks certain individuals to represent him. You do not want to be one of those people. I'm just going to tell you, you do not want to be one of the people. Look at Moshe. It was so horrible. He asked God, if you care about me at all, you're just going to kill me now.
Yeah.
So why would somebody want to be envious of Moshe? The responsibility and the audience,
The burden.
were such that he wanted to die rather than go forward. Look at Shamuel, the greatest of the Shaphat judges and a prophet. And he came to Yahowah and said, I have failed you terribly. These people have chosen to ramrod a very bad decision over my advice. And, God said, no, they didn't reject you. They rejected me.
How about
but-
Yeshaya? He
but
opens
he
the
couldn't do it.
door to heaven,
Yeah.
and there's no one there. The man drops
And
to his knees
He's
and
devoted
bawls.
his life to conveying the word, the testimony of Yahweh to his people. And he expects that, well, there'll be this huge crowd out there that have benefited from what he had to say. He's got the most marvelous presentation of God's story from beginning to end. And God opens the door. He's brought Yeshaya into Shamaim. And there's not a soul outside. And, Moshe is just, Yeshaya is distraught.
Soul
He
crushed.
breaks down, cries, and said, "Oh my God, I have failed you." And so, was that a fun job to know that you poured your life into this, and you don't have a single soul who has been saved as a result of what you've done? And then Yahweh says, "Hey, just as he did with Moshe, he did, and he did with Dode later." And by the way, Dode flatlined on this. It got to be too much after the last of the rebellions. He just flatlined and said, I can't do this anymore either. You do not want to be jealous of these people. Now, with Moshe, he showed Moshe Eldod and Medod as the answer, that we're only going to bring this rebellion to an end. And with Dode, he showed that there is a Bashar, there is a Choter that's going to finally reconcile what you have done with these wayward brats of Yisrael. It's all going to come together. He's even going to cleanse Yisrael as your bride for the great wedding at the family reunion. And with Yeshaya, he took Yeshaya forward to witness what we're doing now, and the fact that I'm taking so much of the testimony of Yeshaya and applying it as the textbook on how to be a Choter and how to respond to the Choter. And Yeshaya got so excited. He says, "That's my Zero. That's my guy right there. Yeah, guys, he's in the wine vat with me, man. We're doing this together." And he's just all excited about what he's seeing. And then he talks about this man from Edom. He's the one that's going to save many. And it's more like we are going to save many by working together. So Yahweh always gave those that were in an exceedingly difficult spot reason to be optimistic that it would ultimately all work out, even though it was a miserable job. And I want to tell you, well, I love working with Yahweh and translating his testimony and learning from him and gaining insights and
We still want
sharing with
hazard
family
pay.
members. But the fact is, this is a really tough job with tremendous responsibility. And it's a job that heretofore no one has succeeded at, because the audience is so irascible and so difficult. And the mediums that you have to use to communicate are so problematic. Good gracious. I've been fortunate in times of my life, and I've owned really nice, fast airplanes and really big, luxurious boats, and learned how to operate them and myself. And what I constantly told people as I'd have them in guests, either in my airplanes or in my boats, is that there is one thing that's always better than being the owner and operator of a nice airplane and
Having
nice
a
boat.
friend with one.
And that's being friends of somebody that owns a, because you get the advantage without any of the responsibility. And so I constantly tell covenant members, the job that you have is much better than the job that I've got. Here.
I'm voting for hazard pay.
Yeah. So, enjoy it. Don't be envious. This is something you do not want to envy.
No.
And you don't get in God's story to write yourself in. He either writes you in, or you are you're somebody that is making a contribution, but not as one of the main characters in the story.
More so, you don't get to write another story.
No,
ever.
No, you don't get to do that either. That's why the rabbis are in trouble, and the caste that created Christianity are in so much trouble. And well, I would say that Muhammad and Allah are in so much trouble, but that's laughable in their situation. So, notwithstanding the realization that Yahweh and I are offering 25,000 pages of cogent, amplified translation, unlike any other, and derived from the Dead Sea Scrolls, copious amounts of in-depth commentary, and a plethora of insights to verify our conclusions. They are and are foisting, in their case, their mythology on an ignorant and errant portrayal of the 8th Mashal proverb, serving as proof of spirit mom, when there is no mention of spirit or mom in the text.
Oopsie.
But they are relentless in their claims of her nonetheless. And the very fact that you point out, I'm sorry, but it's just like all religious people. I'm sorry, but what you've just said here is contrary to the evidence. And they just get belligerent.
We live in a post-fact world now.
Yeah. So, post-fact world.
Yeah.
While their irrational position is invalid, indeed traitorous, there is an even bigger issue. And that is why Yahweh directed me to and us to Bamidbar, Numbers 12, to begin our resolution of this matter. God wants us to know how we should respond when someone claims that God has more than one authorized voice.
I know how to respond. Nuclear.
Yeah. So who is right when there are mutinous conflicts? Can a person speak for God when their intent is to censure and constrain the chosen voice of God? Can you create a counterfeit of Jesus Christ when you are robbing the very Son of God and the Messiah in the process?
Not if I'm in the room.
I don't think so. Can you write a Talmud that has rabbinical authors and claim that it's a Torah? Since the answer to this question is fundamental and undermining the validity of the leprous Goyim Motherites, posturing their positions on the Shamar Yahowah and Shamar Torah websites and social media pages, but don't worry, you can't see them unless you have the secret password and username. And by the way, the username is not Craig. And the password is no bull.
Yeah.
So just show you how underhanded they are. Not Craig and no bull. It's clearly articulated by Yahweh.
Yeah, I agree. No bull for you.
Yeah.
No bull for you.
We will,
not on Shabuah and not at any other time.
I'm actually having fun with this.
I love it.
I find that all of it is fun because they're just nothing. So, but they aren't nothing for the family. This, I want to continue to emphasize this. We have done the programs on Numbers 11. Numbers 11 was a gut punch to me, and it was a wake-up call so that I would know really what we're up against over these next 99 months. And so I'm really glad for it. And I was delighted to see was inspiration of Eldod and Medod in it as just uplifting affirmation. But Numbers 12, where we are now, this is for you. This is for every member of the covenant family. This is for every Yehudim and Yisraelite out there. It's for you to know how you are being encouraged to respond to the one that Yahweh has chosen to speak for him. It's just like Solomon's Sermon on the Mount, where he said that Yahweh is going to provide this Nakri. And when he speaks, you not only need to listen to what he has to say, you need to respond and do what he says. God's very consistent in this regard. So it is for you to understand that. And that means there's a lot of responsibility that goes with this so that our message is in harmony with Yahweh's message. But it's also about the importance of being an ongoing and devoted contributor to the family. Those are the messages that should resonate throughout this. So we will consider God's instruction regarding the confiscation and manipulation of our collaboration by the rebellious cult, misappropriating everything from God's very name, our titles, terminology, transliterations, and logos. Now, for those who would advocate that there should be additional and competing voices, or that my voice should be filtered through them, well, you're going to notice that God didn't agree. Now, we've gone over our hour program time, which we typically do because, well,
You're a
There's-
talkative
there's-
stick.
There is nothing that God communicates that I'm not enthralled with and curious about and want to share. And I would rather share too much than too little as we go forward. So we're going to end our program on the conclusions of Bob Midbar, Numbers 12:2. And it says, now Yahweh heard about this. Now Yahweh heard about this, which means that Yahweh wasn't there in their presence when they came up to Moshe. Yahweh had come down, he had spoken to Moshe, and he had left again. He didn't want to spend any time around them, and he wasn't actually there as this happened. He just said, and Yahweh heard about this.
Because I told him.
Yes.
I am a tattletale.
Yahweh heard about this.
Yes, I told him.
Yes, indeed. He and I discussed it one evening not long ago.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
he directed me here to Bob Midbar, Numbers 12. However, when Yahweh and I had previously discussed this matter of rebellion, his answer was slightly different and therefore appropriate for that moment a couple of months previous to this, when they had only begun to incriminate themselves and assault me. Back then, he had told me to rebrand the books and the website with his name and with a modern menorah, and to start completely over from scratch in social media under Yahweh's name and his brand, this menorah, eliminating everything that they had done. Clean sweep. I don't want anything to do with what they have done. And as for the psychotic and manipulative instigator, God said, just ignore her for the moment. She'll dig herself in. Just ignore her for the moment. We got things we need to accomplish. So I went about his business and I said nothing. All the while, the rebellion grew to such an extent that I was mocked and deliberately thwarted by them, as they did exactly what Yahweh and I asked them not to do, all the while misappropriating his testimony and my contributions to annul all that we had and would achieve. They even claimed that the upcoming Shabuah harvest was theirs. Now, fast forward a couple of months, and now that this rebellion is too caustic and cancerous, erroneous and antagonistic, that it cannot be ignored without crippling the mission, because they really went very aggressive trying to bring us down. That literally precluding the success that Yahweh intends through our collaboration together. I brought up the issue again with Yahweh. And that is when he directed me here. This is his answer. This is Yahweh's answer to the Miriam and Aaron of Shamar Torah. And Shamar, well, it can't be Yahweh anymore because they've changed his name to Yahweh. And the leprous Goyim Motherites, as well as to their fraudulent use of our collaboration and the promotion of their mother goddess cult. This is why God is saying. Okay, so I'm going one more statement beyond what I said I was going to do, but we'll end here. So, the lone individual, this singular man, Moshe, answered. He was responsive and embroiled in thought before making informed declarations. Anah. He was sincere, straightforward, and devoted in his investigations and answers, lacking pretense while concerned with thinking and responding. He wasn't arrogant or prideful in his reply, even though he has been mistreated and harassed. From Anah, to answer, respond, and testify under duress. Significantly more than any other man who is upon the face of the earth. Wow. Bamidbar, in the wilderness, Numbers 12:3. I'm going to let you contemplate on these unique qualifications of Moshe that were greater than anybody else on the face of the earth. Moshe answered. Moshe was responsive. Moshe replied, and he was embroiled in thought before making informed declarations. He was sincere, straightforward, and devoted in his investigations and answers, lacking pretense, while concerned with thinking and responding, not arrogant or prideful in his reply, even though he has been mistreated and harassed, significantly more than any other man who is on the face of the earth. These are attributes, obviously, and responses that mean a great deal to Yahweh. I thank you for listening to this episode of the Yahweh blog. We'll have the Chakmah Leah in our next program as we proceed through this, and so much of it was instigated by a dislike for her. But, I have countered that with more love for her than their dislike by a millionfold. So it's all good. Thank you for listening.